Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of faith and of conscience, we are living in unprecedented times. The world is watching a rising storm in the Middle East. The tensions between Israel and Iran are no longer whispers in diplomatic corridors, they're erupting into the open. Airstrikes, cyber wars, nuclear fears. But as we watch these events unfold, many believers are asking a deeper question: is this more than geopolitics? Could it be prophecy? Is the book of Ezekiel happening now? For thousands of years, the prophecies of the Bible have remained embedded in sacred texts, studied by the faithful, questioned by skeptics, and often overlooked by those consumed by the noise of the modern world. But every once in a while, history begins to echo scripture so loudly that even the most distracted minds start to wonder. The situation between Israel and Iran has become one of those echoes, a resounding moment in time where what was written long ago seems to be rising again with uncanny clarity. When Ezekiel spoke of a day when Persia would rise against Israel, he wasn't just describing a battle, he was outlining a divine script written thousands of years before today's modern weapons, political strategies, and diplomatic negotiations ever existed. Today, that script feels closer than ever to being acted out in real time. The nation of Iran, known as Persia until the mid-20th century, has emerged as one of the most aggressive adversaries of Israel on the global stage. Their leaders speak with unfiltered intensity about their desire to see the elimination of the Jewish state. Their influence spans far beyond their own borders, reaching into Lebanon through Hezbollah, into Gaza through Hamas, and across Iraq and Syria through a network of armed proxies, sleeper cells, and covert operations. The animosity is not just political. It is rooted in deep ideological opposition, born from theological conflicts, geopolitical goals, and a desire for dominance in a region soaked in spiritual history and endless rivalry. Israel, meanwhile, is not a stranger to being surrounded by enemies. Since its rebirth as a nation in 1948, a fulfillment of prophecy in itself, it has been in a near constant state of military readiness. Yet through war after war, conflict after conflict, it has not only survived, it has thrived. In the face of existential threats, Israel has grown into a technological powerhouse, a regional superpower in terms of intelligence and defense, and a living symbol of resilience. What's more, its enemies' inability to defeat it has only increased curiosity about its spiritual and prophetic significance. Could there be something more at play than just military strength and strategic alliances? Enter the prophecy of Ezekiel. In chapters 38 and 39 of the book that bears his name, the prophet lays out a vision of a great invasion against Israel by a confederation of nations. Among them is Persia. This invasion, unlike anything before it, would be massive in scale and destructive in intent. Yet it would not end in Israel's annihilation. According to Ezekiel, this coordinated attack would lead to divine intervention so powerful, so undeniable, that the world would witness the hand of God in action. The enemies of Israel would be crushed, not by Israeli might alone, but by the outpouring of supernatural judgment. Fire, brimstone, confusion. God himself would fight for his people. Now, as current events unfold, it becomes impossible for many to ignore the similarities. The lines on the map are beginning to look like the ones described in Scripture. The players are moving into position. Iran, Russia, and Turkey, three of the most discussed nations in Ezekiel's prophecy, are increasing their cooperation. Whether through economic deals, military coordination, or shared opposition to Western influence and Israeli policy, the bond between these nations is tightening. Meanwhile, Israel finds itself more isolated, more scrutinized, and more threatened than it has been in decades. It's no longer just about rogue missiles or isolated terror attacks. It's about existential threats, nuclear capabilities, and direct warnings of destruction. The question rises like smoke from a battlefield: is Ezekiel happening now? It's a question that demands more than curiosity. It demands discernment. Because it's not enough to recognize patterns, you have to understand the purpose behind them. Ezekiel didn't write his vision as a mere prediction. He wrote it as a divine revelation, one meant to remind the world of who holds ultimate authority. While world leaders strategize, armies mobilize, and citizens protest in the streets, Ezekiel reminds us that God is never absent. He is not silent, and his word never returns void. But here's what makes this moment so sobering. While people scroll through news apps, engage in heated debates online, or tune into biased news channels, prophecy is being fulfilled in real time. What once felt ancient is now urgent. What was once symbolic now looks literal. Ezekiel's words, written in exile on the banks of the Chebar River in Babylon, are finding new life in the hearts and minds of those paying attention to today's headlines. The tension in the Middle East isn't just a regional conflict, it's a global alarm clock. It's shaking us from apathy. It's forcing even the indifferent to ask, what if the Bible was right all along? Still, there are those who scoff, who dismiss the connection as coincidence or conspiracy. They look at the geopolitical complexities and claim prophecy has no place in modern analysis. But they forget something vital. Prophecy doesn't need validation from politics. It exists outside of time, anchored in eternity, authored by the creator of history. What makes Ezekiel's prophecy so compelling is not that it might happen. It's that it was always going to happen. The question was never if, but when. And here we are. Iran is enriching uranium and testing ballistic missiles while chanting death to Israel. Israel, in turn, is launching preemptive strikes, coordinating with allies, and preparing for the unthinkable. Meanwhile, regional neighbors either choose sides or silently watch, hoping the fire doesn't spread across their borders. But prophecy shows us it will. This won't be a contained conflict. It never was meant to be, because the battle Ezekiel described was not just a military clash. It was a spiritual showdown. It was a demonstration of divine sovereignty in a world intoxicated by power and pride. For believers, this moment is not one of fear, but of awakening. It's a time to dust off forgotten scriptures, to look past political spin, and to recognize that God's word is unfolding with breathtaking accuracy. It's a time to prepare, not just physically or politically, but spiritually. Because if Ezekiel is indeed happening now, then what comes next will shake the very foundations of belief, identity, and destiny. Those who stand with Israel do so not because it is perfect, but because it is prophetic. Its existence defies logic, its survival defies odds, its story defies history. No other nation has been exiled, scattered, and persecuted for millennia, only to return to its homeland, revive its language, and defend its borders with unyielding courage. That alone is enough to make any honest observer ask, is something greater protecting this nation? The answer is in Ezekiel. The answer is in the countless prophecies that speak not only of judgment, but of restoration. Because for every threat against Israel, there is a promise from God that he will never abandon his covenant people. That he will fight for them when the world turns against them. That he will reveal his power not through treaties or tanks, but through unmistakable acts of divine intervention. And so the world watches, some with dread, some with hope, some with indifference, but all are watching because the tension cannot be ignored. The buildup cannot be denied. Something is shifting. Something ancient is resurfacing. Something sacred is speaking louder than ever. Maybe it's the whisper of Ezekiel echoing across time. Maybe it's the sound of prophecy breathing life into the present. Or maybe it's God reminding a world that has forgotten him that he is still here, still watching, still moving. We are not spectators, we are witnesses. And in witnessing, we are called to remember that the greatest battles are not fought with bullets and bombs, but with truth and belief. As Israel braces for what may come, as Iran sharpens its threats and alliances grow darker, we must not forget what the prophets already declared. The outcome is already written. The story is already known. And in the end, it is not fear that will prevail, it is faith. Even before history documents the unfolding of human ambition, sacred text had already outlined the players, their patterns, and their collisions. It's not accidental that empires emerge and dissolve according to a logic invisible to worldly eyes, but crystal clear through the lens of revelation. When the world seems chaotic, prophetic order moves beneath the surface. Patterns harden into reality, and age-old names begin to echo across new alliances. It's no longer theory when current regimes start to reflect the exact configurations foretold long before the rise of political science or diplomacy. This is the terrain we now enter, the landscape where names inscribed in ancient manuscripts start appearing on today's global agreements and battlefield correspondence. As we stand amid global disorientation, seemingly unrelated powers are gravitating toward each other with unnatural speed. No longer restricted by regional interests, the forces surrounding this conflict span continents, ideologies, and centuries of dormant intentions. Modern observers see military drills, arms deals, and energy negotiations. But beyond the press releases and policy summits, something deeper is converging. Nations with conflicting agendas uniting not because of shared values, but because of mutual hostility toward a singular landmass, a singular symbol, and a singular promise. The convergence of once separate entities under a singular objective was never random. It was always foretold. When leaders from the North and East strengthen their cooperation, it's tempting to dismiss it as geopolitical evolution. But there's a framework that transcends natural explanation. A region that once thrived under empires mentioned by prophets is now rising with a renewed purpose, often unrecognized by its own architects. There's a blueprint being followed, unwittingly or deliberately, that stretches beyond the reach of satellites or statecraft. For centuries, certain territories were seen as disconnected from each other, sharing little more than a place on the same continent. But now, those territories are speaking the same language of opposition, sharpening their instruments in shared training exercises, and exchanging not just goods but objectives. One doesn't need to believe in prophecy to observe the acceleration. It's visible in the increased coordination between militarized states once thought ideologically incompatible. Their domestic systems vary. One may be theocratic, another authoritarian, another populist, but when it comes to specific regional dynamics, they are in lockstep. This unity of purpose among them didn't arise out of friendship. It was forged in contempt, and the object of that contempt is the same, making it the very axis around which their cooperation spins. This isn't conventional alignment. It's synchrony with ancient precedent, fitting into a puzzle that began long before modern borders were drawn. Even the territories not leading the charge are no longer passive observers. Smaller states are positioning themselves as logistical corridors, ideological echo chambers, or resource contributors to the larger cause. The gravity of collective resentment is so strong that neutrality becomes impossible. Either you are with the vision being shaped or you are its obstacle. And obstacles are quickly marginalized. One by one, capitals once aligned with Western priorities are shifting, not necessarily because they share doctrine with those at the center of this alliance, but because they sense a new axis forming. One that dares to challenge, destabilize, and, if prophecy is to be believed, ultimately fail under divine pressure. Still, for now, the momentum of this coalition is undeniable. Their drills grow larger, their words more provocative, and their technological coordination more sophisticated. The combination of cyber warfare, surveillance infrastructure, energy dependency, and artificial intelligence allows them to do more than march or strike. It enables them to shape perception itself. And while they construct narratives in the global South and East, their real message is meant for the land they most oppose. Not through speech, but through readiness. Not through treaties, but through threats wrapped in cold discipline. It's no longer acceptable to interpret these formations as temporary. Temporary doesn't explain decades of ideologically driven investment in destabilizing a specific country. Temporary doesn't explain why aerial systems are installed precisely where their ancestors once stood, and why today's parliaments invoke the same language as empires once rebuked by prophets. Temporary doesn't drive enemies into alliances so unnatural they require sustained ideological compromise just to exist. No, this isn't temporary, this is predetermined. We're watching the return of movements that were never fully buried, just dormant, waiting for the right generation of leaders with the right appetite for confrontation. And they've arrived. Leaders driven not by strategy alone, but by vision. Not democratic vision or economic vision, but something ancestral. It's the belief that their moment has come. That long, delayed ambitions can now be realized with the tools of modern warfare and the coverage of distracted global media. This confidence emboldens not just their speeches, but their actions. From weapons testing to naval incursions, each gesture carries the weight of decades of grievances and centuries of prophecy. It's not about provoking for leverage anymore. It's about asserting position before the final move. As their alignment strengthens, the world responds as it always does, with analysis, condemnation, and attempts at mitigation. But beneath all of that is uncertainty, an unspoken awareness that this isn't just another flare up in a troubled region. This is structural. This is foundational. This is the kind of coalition that doesn't dissolve after a few press conferences. This is the formation that only collapses through intervention not by allies, but by the author of time itself. Until then, the alliances will continue to mature, their missions will sharpen, and their unity will become increasingly intolerant of hesitation. There's an irony here. The more this alliance asserts itself, the more it fulfills what was foretold about its very existence. Every parade, every joint statement, every show of force is a mirror held up to prophecy. And they cannot see it, or perhaps they do, and simply believe they can outrun destiny. Perhaps they believe their moment of dominance will rewrite what was written. But the ink of the sacred is not erasable, and every movement toward confrontation only accelerates the arrival of an outcome they cannot control. Observers will note the specific names being reintroduced into modern vocabulary, names once confined to theological discussions, now appearing in military journals and government briefings. These names were never mythical. They were historical markers with spiritual significance, and now they are geopolitical realities. Every agreement signed between two distant states with a shared adversary brings another ancient name back into relevance. Every maneuvering of air bases or ports in regions referenced by prophets brings another verse closer to tangible fulfillment. And while world leaders trade sanctions and intelligence briefings, a parallel narrative runs quietly through the undercurrent. The narrative isn't about power, it's about sequence. This formation isn't just growing, it's aligning in the precise order long described by those who were dismissed as apocalyptic or extreme. But there's nothing extreme about a pattern repeating itself exactly as described. There's only clarity for those who choose to see it. What separates this particular constellation of actors from past coalitions is its endurance. Others have risen and fractured under the weight of ego, economics, or rebellion. But this one endures because it is not bound by political affinity alone. It is held together by something far more potent, an underlying force that compels it forward, a spiritual momentum that cares little for the convenience of the global order. This endurance has given it time to infiltrate, to influence, and to prepare. Even dissenters within their own borders find themselves crushed or co-opted as the movement allows no internal fracture. That kind of unity can only come from a sense of inevitability. They are not just acting, they believe they are fulfilling. Whether they admit it publicly or not, their movements suggest a depth of motivation not explainable through conventional analysis. They are not simply making war. They are answering a call, and the one they seek to surrounded already in narrative, economically pressured, diplomatically isolated, is not panicking. There is a strange stillness in its stance, a type of confidence that suggests awareness not only of the threat, but of the script. That's what makes this conflict different. One side strategizes to dominate. The other stands as if it knew this moment would arrive and simply waits for what comes next. That kind of posture unnerves even the most prepared adversaries. As this coalition deepens, the silence from some nations is louder than any threat. The hesitation of allies, the shifting of global sympathies, the wariness of prolonged tensions. These are signs too. They signal that this is not just about 2 or 3 powers aligning, but about a world shifting under invisible pressure. The pressure isn't just from the weight of modern threats. It's from the reawakening of truths long buried by disbelief, distraction, and denial. This is not the result of sudden aggression. It's the consequence of an ancient grievance reassembled in modern armor. It's a reminder that time does not dissolve purpose. It only delays it. And now delay has reached its limit. The pieces are nearly set. The lines are nearly drawn. And the alliances that once seemed improbable are now inevitable. What we are witnessing is not the prelude to something ordinary. It is the reemergence of something foretold. The formation of this modern axis may look new, but it is as old as the words spoken by those who saw further than satellites ever will. Moments arise in the timeline of nations when explanation fails and logic reaches its threshold. Charts can forecast probabilities, leaders can plan contingencies, generals can deploy forces with precision, but none of these account for the intangible. The space where comprehension ends and wonder begins is where the real question lies, not in policy memos or satellite feeds, but in the realm where outcomes refuse to match expectations. That is where this story unfolds, in the gap between what should have happened and what continues to happen. Across decades of hostility, the outcome has remained the same. One sovereign entity, smaller in scale, fewer in number, hemmed in by hostility and ideology, continues to prevail against every conceivable forecast. This is not a consequence of advanced systems alone. It's not about borders, alliances, or economic resilience. It's something deeper. A presence that cannot be charted, yet continues to manifest at every critical juncture. An unseen defender moving without announcement, leaving only survival as its signature. From its earliest resurgence, every season of attack has ended in astonishment. Against adversaries both near and distant, against campaigns designed with overwhelming intensity, the target remains intact. Not without scars, not without losses, but always standing, always existing. Its flag remains aloft while others unravel. The pattern is too consistent, too frequent, too precise to ignore. There is a force operating behind appearances, one that renders advanced calculations obsolete. Skeptics scramble for explanations. They credit superior coordination, unmatched espionage, or bold leadership. Those factors exist, but they don't answer the deepest riddle. How does endurance continue when the odds defy it again and again? Why does this one nation, smaller than most states, surrounded by threats, retain its footing? If this were mere coincidence, it would have faltered by now. Yet it doesn't. And not only does it persist, it flourishes. From scorched terrain has risen innovation, community, and tenacity so uncommon it causes even critics to reevaluate. That kind of resilience is not born overnight. It is drawn from a covenant older than kings. One that spans millennia, stitched together not by strategy but by promise. That promise has never relied on global consensus. It requires no majority, no sanction from organizations, no endorsement from influencers. Its origin is not diplomatic. Its authority is not voted upon. Its source is neither earthbound nor temporal. And that is what makes this moment so difficult to decode for those trapped within material thinking. Every missile intercepted, every ambush foiled, every crisis averted, each one echoes something spoken long before modernity existed. Each narrow escape, each preserved boundary, carries the fingerprint of that promise, not always in ways easy to detect. Sometimes it comes through confusion in enemy ranks, sometimes through inexplicable delays or failures, other times through unity that shouldn't exist. But always it arrives. Always it disrupts destruction before it completes its course. This is not to suggest invulnerability. Harms do occur. Tragedies happen. But what defies comprehension is not immunity from pain. It is the refusal of extinction. That refusal is not man-made. It's embedded into the identity of the people themselves. As though the soil beneath them whispers a vow repeated through every generation. A vow that no matter how fierce the assault, existence will continue. History proves this, not only from recent memory, but across epochs. Attempts to erase have only resulted in reinforcement. Those who rose with banners of elimination have all met the same end. Empires that once stretched from horizon to horizon are now names in museums. Regimes that declared annihilation have become footnotes. Leaders who boasted of final solutions have become cautionary tales. And still, the people they targeted remain, not as relics, but as a living, thriving community. That paradox cannot be rationalized through strength alone. It speaks to something sustained by more than effort. It speaks of being kept. The idea of being kept implies an external force, not protection in the way a fortress shields its occupants, but preservation born of intent. The kind that operates beyond perception, executing interventions no intelligence agency detects. This protection doesn't just preserve bodies, It maintains purpose. The continuation isn't just about remaining alive. It's about continuing a legacy that carries implications for the rest of humanity. That legacy cannot be fully explained by land rights or historical grievances. It centers on an origin tied to destiny rather than history. This origin cannot be rewritten by journalists or professors. It existed before pens or keyboards. It was spoken into being. And that spoken word has not faded with time. It has not diminished under pressure. If anything, the more resistance it encounters, the stronger it proves to be. Detractors will argue that chance plays a role. That timing, global sympathies, or shifting alliances have created a space for this nation to endure. But even a glance at history shows how many civilizations have fallen under less pressure. How many causes have crumbled despite overwhelming support? Chance is not that consistent. Coincidence doesn't build that kind of longevity. Something else does. When surrounding forces commit to elimination and still fail repeatedly over successive decades, the pattern becomes spiritual. You can only study that pattern so long before realizing it doesn't fit within the usual framework of resistance and retaliation. It reflects an arrangement that cannot be undone through politics, intimidation, or even military might. It's the kind of arrangement that ensures preservation even when surrounded, even when betrayed, even when misunderstood. This endurance is not for pride. It's not a declaration of superiority. It's a signal, a message embedded in survival itself. A message not for one group, but for all who observe with discernment. The message says that purpose outweighs pressure, that assignment survives attack, and that what was chosen remains chosen regardless of the volume of opposition. That kind of preservation speaks louder than speeches. It testifies without requiring words. Each time maps are redrawn, each time allies fall away, each time resources dwindle or threats rise, still the target continues. Continues not just to exist, but to lead in medicine, in technology, in disaster response, in resilience. That kind of impact from such a small origin once again defies norms. There's no logical reason why a place with so many enemies should also produce so many solutions. Unless, of course, the continued presence serves not just national interest, but global example. In moments of severe tension, observers begin to look again. Not with political analysis or media commentary, but with deeper questions. Questions about why certain territories persist while others collapse. Questions about the role of this preservation in a larger narrative. Questions about the origin of strength that doesn't come from missiles or money. These questions don't lead to easy answers, but they open the door to truths waiting just beneath the surface. There is something unshakable about people who know they are preserved for a reason. They don't operate in fear, even under threat. They don't yield to despair, even under siege. Their confidence is not arrogance, it's awareness. Awareness that they are part of a continuum. Not just a people group, but a living prophecy. That awareness shapes how they respond to pressure, how they rebuild after tragedy, how they prepare for what comes next. What comes next is always contested. But what remains constant is this: even under severe trial, the narrative does not fracture. Even when encircled, the core remains intact. Even when silence falls upon the rest of the world, the light does not extinguish. There is a commitment wrapped into every breath, a persistence that doesn't just come from memory, it comes from mission. A mission given, not chosen. One that doesn't retreat when surrounded but strengthens. The reality of that mission unnerves those committed to opposition, because it means their weapons aren't aimed at flesh and blood alone. They are striking against an assignment, and assignments cannot be assassinated. They can be opposed, delayed, distorted, but never destroyed. Especially when their origin is not man, especially when they are reinforced from beyond what the eye can see. Those who continue to stand know this. They don't just remember their past, they live as evidence of the promise. And each time another threat rises and fails, the evidence multiplies. For those watching carefully, it's not just resilience on display, it's revelation. And the revelation is this: that behind every sustained life there stands a reason, a purpose deeper than protection, a calling that remains undiminished through every generation. Eyes do not lie when they witness things no system can rationalize. What we see now is not just survival, it is awakening. Something vast and invisible is stirring beneath the rhythm of our ordinary world. It's not waiting for headlines or confirmation from institutions. It's already moving. And those who perceive it sense that the final pieces are no longer scattered. They're settling into place with deliberate intention. This alignment is not accidental. The clock didn't restart. It never stopped. We simply forgot we were living on borrowed time. Around us, a strange stillness precedes the shift. Not the calm of peace, but the hush before eruption. Every tremor beneath diplomatic talk, every whisper in security circles, every tremble on unstable ground, all point to the same reality. The age of guessing is closing. The season of clarity is arriving, not through forceful declarations, but through undeniable manifestations. A truth ignored too long is no longer waiting to be understood. It's beginning to introduce itself through events that defy ordinary comprehension. And while many walk through their lives insulated by routine, convinced that they're distant from these flashpoints, the ripple effect won't respect distance. What forms in a single corridor soon echoes in every direction. What ignites in one region finds fuel in another. This isn't a regional eruption, it's global ignition. It only begins where the ground is already cracked by ancient weight. But when it spreads, it redefines every landscape it touches. Those who believed they were safe behind oceans or policies will learn that no fortress resists momentum set in motion by divine appointment. Not all see what is forming. Many refuse to. Not because it isn't visible, but because it interrupts comfort. It questions assumptions. It removes the illusion of control. That illusion is one of the great deceptions. Convinced that progress is linear, that humanity writes its own destiny by sheer innovation or governance. But destiny isn't built by committees or economies, it's summoned by origin, and what was set in motion before birth cannot be rewritten by hands that never authored it. Even now, those paying attention recognize the signals. Shifts in language, escalation in rhetoric, reshuffling of allegiances. It isn't just about territory or influence anymore. It's about declaration. Those opposing the sacred center of the coming storm aren't merely positioning themselves militarily. They are positioning themselves spiritually, choosing sides in a battle older than borders, choosing allegiance, whether knowingly or not, to one of two ends: preservation or annihilation. There is no neutrality in what approaches. In places of power, decisions are being made without comprehension of their full consequences. Because this battle is layered. It wears the mask of politics, but its core is deeply ancient. It wears the clothes of governments, but its blood is prophetic. What's rising now has been rising quietly for longer than any summit can measure. It's the collision of promises spoken and challenges raised. It's confrontation born not of recent history, but of defiance against origin itself. All empires that collapse begin by denying the sacred. All powers that fall begin by mocking what they can't understand. That's the trap being laid once more, laughing at what's holy, minimizing what's eternal. But laughter fades quickly when the ground splits beneath pride. And that ground is already shifting. Fault lines are appearing not just in territory, but in truth. Where once there was illusion, now there is exposure. Where once there was deception, now there is revelation. The revelation, however, is not gentle. It doesn't ask for consent. It doesn't arrive in politeness. It breaks through like thunder. It demands attention. And for those who've spent years dulling their senses with distractions, its arrival will be jarring. Because when revelation comes, it leaves no space for denial. It illuminates every corner, including the ones we'd rather keep dim. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. Those who are attuned to this shift are not watching with fear. They are watching with anticipation, not because they desire chaos, but because they know order follows upheaval when it's guided by higher hands. They've studied the markers. They've prepared hearts, not bunkers. Because this isn't about escaping turbulence. It's about standing firm in purpose. It's about understanding that endurance was never the goal. Fulfillment was. There are patterns repeating that were recorded long ago, not vague predictions or metaphors, but detailed sequences that now unfold in real time. When the precise relationships between nations, once viewed as disconnected, begin mirroring sacred descriptions, it's not coincidence, it's choreography. And every movement is part of a script not authored in war rooms, but in eternity. As this drama intensifies, the watching world becomes polarized. Some mock, others tremble. Some engage, others retreat. But the truth does not shift based on reaction. It proceeds with or without validation. And in doing so, it begins to press into every sphere: economics, culture, ideology, even weather. All systems begin to react when the spiritual realm invades the natural. And that invasion is no longer abstract. It's arriving with force. Resistance to this truth doesn't delay its impact. It only increases its cost. Denial doesn't prevent fulfillment. It only ensures the unprepared are caught unaware. Because the moment doesn't wait for everyone to believe. It waits only for the appointed time. And when that time arrives, even those who never read a single prophecy will recognize that something beyond explanation has entered their reality. Across screens and timelines, the noise grows louder. Competing narratives blur perception. But through all of it, a quiet certainty begins to grow in those who know where to look. That certainty isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It stands still while the world runs in circles. It speaks not in slogans, but in assurance. It doesn't flinch when surrounded. Because it knows what's written cannot be unwritten. And it knows the battle was decided long before the first threat was uttered. The ones sounding the alarm are not new. They've existed in every generation, often ridiculed, often dismissed, but always consistent, always anchored, because they weren't speaking from opinion. They were echoing what had already been spoken. And now, more than ever, their voices are needed. Not to panic the masses, but to prepare the few. Because preparation is not about panic. It's about position. It's about alignment with what remains when everything else collapses. The ones who align will not escape the shaking, but they will stand through it. They won't be spared discomfort, but they will be strengthened by conviction. Not by might, not by connections, but by certainty in something unshakable. That certainty will be tested. That faith will be ridiculed, but in the end, it will remain when all else is removed. Because what's real doesn't require applause to endure. Voices will rise offering alternatives, promising solutions through compromise, unity through dilution, safety through silence. But none of those roads lead to restoration. They lead only to delay, and delay no longer serves the hour. This hour demands clarity, not popularity, not diplomacy. Clarity. The kind of clarity that offends but saves. The kind that cuts through illusion and reveals what's true. That kind is rare, but it's coming. And when it comes, it will not flatter, it will not negotiate, it will not conform to the sensibilities of those addicted to comfort. It will draw a line, and that line will separate not by appearance, but by allegiance, not by profession, but by position. Where you stand will matter more than what you say, and standing will become more costly than speaking. But it will also become the only thing worth doing. Because in that hour, neutrality will vanish, the middle will collapse, and every soul will be faced with a choice: align with fading systems or anchor in what cannot be shaken. Many will hesitate, some will waver, but those who have already chosen will remain unmoved, because they knew this day would arrive. Not because they were smarter, but because they listened. They watched, they believed when it wasn't popular, and now what they believed is becoming undeniable. Those who ridiculed them will remember their warnings. Those who ignored them will recall their persistence. And many will wish they had paid attention sooner. But for those who still can, there is time. Not much, but enough. Enough to realign, to refocus, to respond. Because this isn't about fear, it's about invitation. An invitation to clarity. An invitation to step out of confusion and into certainty. That certainty doesn't eliminate cost, but it does eliminate aimlessness. It provides direction when all else disorients. It provides peace when chaos erupts. Not by avoiding reality, but by recognizing a deeper one. One where timelines are guided by intention. One where battles are part of restoration. One where the end is not destruction, but revelation. And that revelation is no longer far. It's here.